All right. There may be a few more people sign on, but I think we will go ahead and get started. So, welcome everyone. For those that are currently attending, I'm Dwayne Friend. I'm with University of Illinois Extension, and today I would like to welcome Laura Lengnick as our presenter for this month's professional development webinar. Laura is an award-winning soil scientist with 30 years of experience working as a researcher, policymaker, educator, activist, and farmer to put sustainability values into action in U.S. food and farming. Her research in soil health and sustainable farming systems was nationally recognized with the USDA Secretary's Honor Award in 2002, and she served as the lead author of the 2013 USDA report, Climate Change in Agriculture in the United States, Effects and Adaptation. As founder and principal at Cultivating Resilience, LLC, Laura and her associates work with organizations of all kinds to integrate resilience thinking into operations and strategic planning. Since 2015, Laura has led federal, state, and local climate resilience research and planning projects, exploring ag's climate solutions, conducted resilience assessments, and developed carbon management plans for small and mid-sized businesses, and designed and delivered climate risk management workshops tailored to diverse audiences throughout North America. Laura, welcome, and I'm turning it over to you.
Okay, thanks. Yes, so I will share my screen. And if there's anyone in the audience that can give us a quick fix for how to get to presenter mode, please unmic and let us know, but this is our best effort at making that happen today. There's some kind of glitch going on between my system and Zoom. Can everybody see the slide?
Yes.
Okay. All right, and with no nifty solutions forthcoming, we'll just go ahead.
Laura, you can hit the button at the lower right hand of your screen. It looks like a slide projector next to where you can size and resize.
That's just going to zoom in. What you want to do is you want to go up to the very top and where it says you have slideshow highlighted on the very left hand side. It says from beginning. Do you see that?
I think you're seeing something maybe I'm not seeing.
Under the word file at the top.
Yeah, I could, because I hit the other screen. Hang on. Let's try again. Okay. File.
And then go down to from beginning.
Right below that.
Yep.
And it's the same icon in the lower right hand next to where you resize. Same icon.
So just click on it.
On the from beginning?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Okay. That work?
No. No, we still.
I will say, if it helps you feel any better, for some reason there's a little bit of a lag. Like when you first shared slides, it took a while for it to load for some reason. So
yeah. We had that huge storm going across the country, went through here last night. I'm in Asheville, and the internet's been a little tricky today. Okay. Can y'all see practical climate risk management? Lessons from sustainable. Okay, great.
Yes.
So let's go ahead and we'll get started. And I really made an effort to not overwhelm you with slides today. And so I'd be really happy to answer questions along the way if there's something that you'd like to clarify. Or comment on. I really enjoy having a chance to have this sort of a meeting with technical assistance professionals. It's really good for me to share these ideas that I've developed with the help of farmers over the last decade, and have them kind of vetted or just get that different point of view from technical assistance folks. So please feel free to jump in if you have a question. And also, Dwayne, if there's anything in the chat, I can't watch that, and I've never figured out how to do that multitasking. So please just speak up if you if there anything comes through in the chat. All right, here we go. So I started on my journey of thinking about climate change adaptation when I was invited to serve during a sabbatical year as on the lead author team of the 2013 report from USDA called Climate Change and Agriculture in the United States, Effects and Adaptation. And a significant aspect of this report was that it was the first time that USDA was doing a bulletin or making a bulletin that included adaptation to climate change. And I actually led the adaptation chapter. And while I think there's still a lot of great information to be found in this bulletin, I wanted to focus on just one highlight that really provided the impetus for the chapter, the adaptation chapter in this report. And that was a high-level finding that climate change represents a novel and unprecedented challenge to the sustainability of US agriculture. And so as the group of scientists that worked on this report, we had 5 or 6 in the lead author team, but then 68 scientists all around the country spent a year working on putting this report together. And as we thought about this and talked about this, it made it clear that the adaptation in particular had the job of looking for options and things that we could apply in agriculture, concepts, bodies of knowledge, tools that could help agriculture, farmers and ranchers and growers try to manage this unprecedented challenge. And one of the findings, or within that finding, we recognized that agriculture was entering a new risk management landscape. And just as a reminder, risk is the probability or threat of damage, injury, loss, or any other negative occurrence. And I find it really helpful to divide risk up into its 2 parts, which is the probability of some kind of damaging occurrence and the consequences of that occurrence. And one of our findings was that climate risk, which is this additional risk associated with more variable weather and more frequent and extreme and damaging extreme weather events. So it's that additional risk. Climate risk is actually pushing the entire risk management landscape in agriculture from that lower risk to in the lower left to that higher risk part of this matrix in the top right. And so it's
Laura, we're not seeing your slide changes if you are
no.
moving.
Yes, I am.
Okay, we're just seeing that for sliding still.
Well,
so when you share your screen, you have to be sure to click the screen that you are, the right screen. That makes sense.
I do. Yes, I do know that. Oh, so I'm clicking on the screen that has the PowerPoint presentation. Okay. So you're seeing the first screen now?
Yes.
Okay. Oh, I mean, sorry, the first slide.
Yeah, that's what we're seeing.
Okay. And now, second slide.
No.
Okay. I've got one other fix I can try here. Okay. All right. New slide?
Still seeing the first one.
Give it a second. Because Dwayne, when we tried, I set it up the way we tried earlier and this was working, but it's not working now, huh?
There it goes.
It goes.
All right, so there's just some sort of real delay. Okay, well, that's all the stuff I talked about in terms of the report that I was invited to be part of. And one of our high-level findings was the unprecedented challenge. Let me know when it shifts. I'll get a sense of how
It
long.
did.
Excellent. All right. And one of the other important findings of this report, or first-time findings, was naming this new risk that is associated with more variable weather and more frequent and damaging extreme weather events, and that's climate risk. And I know y'all heard all of that, but just to remind you. And so my job as the lead author on the adaptation chapter was to look at what we know about how to manage more variable conditions, more damaging conditions, and this increased risk that was shifting weather, which has been a long time risk consideration in agriculture. But it's really shifting from something that was more predictable in its unpredictability to something that was even less predictable than in the past. And when the team that worked on the adaptation chapter, when we started looking to the literature, one thing that became clear very quickly was that there was a lot of very useful concepts, language, and tools, and just ways of thinking about managing farming systems or agroecosystems in a way that reduced climate risk or reduce the uncertainty, or maybe another way to put it would be increase the probability of success in uncertain conditions. So I'll just ask one more time. Are y'all looking at the definition of resilience slide?
No, it's still the book and the climate risk.
Oh man, I do not. Sorry, folks. I have no idea why this isn't working.
There it is.
It's working now?
Yep.
Okay. Okay. And so in that work that we did, the literature review work that we did, we discovered a type of resilient science that's called social ecological resilient science. And if you're interested in just looking at the science basis for many of the ideas that I will present today, you can check out this. I encourage you to go to this resilience, resalliance.org /resilience. It's an alliance of resilience scientists and practitioners. It's an international group, and they're doing some really great work to apply social ecological resilience theory to practice. And so this is when I speak about resilience today and in my own work, this is the kind of resilience that I'm referring to. And there's lots of other kinds of resilience out there. So when you're first learning or getting into this literature, it can be a little bit confusing because there's engineering resilience, there's psychological resilience, there's disaster management and resilience in disaster conditions, and there's also just natural systems or ecological resilience. But it's this sweet spot of social ecological resilience, which is a expertise within ecological resilience that we found had the best application or the most useful application to agricultural systems. And so what is resilience? It's the capacity of a social ecological system And that's systems that are ecological in nature, but are dominated by humans. That's one way to think about what a social ecological system is. So it's the capacity of a social ecological system to maintain its essential structure and function as conditions change. And another way to think about resilience is that it describes the degree to which a system is capable of self-organization, learning, and adaptation. There's a lot of talk about resilience today, and I think agriculture could really benefit from just a little more depth in thinking and training in the different kinds of resilience there is out there, and in particular, this type of resilience science, social ecological resilience science, that fits so well with helping us think about managing social ecological systems in conditions of high uncertainty. So I'm sorry, Dwayne, but I think I'm going to need you to let me know you're seeing the new slide.
Yep, it keeps going.
Okay, great. So I just want to share very briefly a few of the concepts within resilient science that we thought really applied well, or was connected to ideas and thinking that were already in agriculture. And remember that we were doing this research more than a decade ago, around 2011, 2012. So the first concept is that resilience is about a lot more than bouncing back, which is the kind of public, the normal, informal way that we think about what resilience means. But it turns out that there are two other capacities. That bounce back capacity is definitely there. That's recovery capacity. But there's also two other capacities that we thought actually had a lot more to offer. Agricultural adaptation and managing climate risk in agriculture. And it's this capacity to respond to a disturbance and the capacity to recognize when it's time to change, when conditions have changed to the point where the current system no longer serves you well or meets the goals that you have for that system, and you need to begin changing it. So that's all three capacities: response, recovery, and transformation. And there's a lot of knowledge within social ecological resilient science to help us think about how we can design and manage agricultural systems to enhance these three capacities. But in particular, that response capacity, that's the ability to design and manage a system to avoid or reduce damage when there's a disturbance. That capacity, I think the response capacity has so much to offer agriculture because we really do have a lot of assets that we can think about. How do we design and manage them to enhance response capacity? And isn't that a powerful idea? Because if we can design and manage farming systems so that they can avoid damage during a disturbance, we never even have to think about bouncing back. A lot of great ideas in that idea of response capacity, and then also really powerful to remember that resilience is actually about more than just bouncing back. The second idea is that resilience is rooted in community, and this is really recognizing that a farm is not an island, that it requires, in order to be resilient or in order to be sustained over time and through disturbances, the farm must have relationships, both looking outward in the farm, healthy relationships to community, but also healthy relationships within the farm, within the people and the land and the livestock and the crops and so on. So that's the second. Resilience is rooted in community. It's bigger than a farm, an individual farm. The third one is that resilience depends on having a diversified portfolio of assets. And in this example, I was really trying to turn up the difference between sustainable and industrial agriculture. Neither one, making a judgment about neither one, or actually making a judgment that neither one is actually working with typically working with a full portfolio of assets, of rich assets. And that in order to be resilient, we really need to bring the perspectives and the tools and the concepts from sustainable and industrial agriculture and bring them together to make a resilient agriculture. And the last one is that resilience systems cultivate 3 key behaviors. And this is speaking more specifically to the relationships within an agroecosystem. And those 3 specific behaviors are diverse relationships of mutual benefit. And diverse is important, relationship is important, and mutual benefit is important in this phrase. All 3 are important. And it really puts the focus on the importance of relationship, both on the farm and between farm and community, to cultivate resilience. The second is that resilient systems tend to cultivate regional self-reliance. And what that means very simply is that the resilient system is drawing on inputs from the region and selling outputs or releasing outputs from to the region. So it's very much a more regional perspective on agriculture, both on the inputs needed, also on the outputs, the saleable outputs, but also any waste associated with that farm system. So that's regional self-reliance. And the last is, and I think personally, that is probably the most difficult, where will require the greatest change in agriculture if we want to move to a more resilient agriculture in this country. And then the last key behavior is that resilient systems cultivate and accumulate community-based wealth. And in this case, wealth means more than just money, more than just finances, but it's really referring to all of the different kinds of wealth that a community needs for its well-being. And so that would be natural resources, human and social resources, and financial resources, and also technological resources. So the idea here is that a resilient community is working on, is organized, designed, and managed in a way that you're actually accumulating community-based wealth over time, rather than extracting wealth over time. So I know that's a lot to throw at you, but I wanted to get a little deeper into the ideas to let you see some of the concepts that we addressed in the 2013 USDA report in the adaptation chapter. And so the last thing,
And it did switch.
thank you. I think we're okay then. The last idea or concept that we address in the USDA report that's particularly important, so I wanted to bring it up here, is this idea of targeted versus general response strategies. And remember, response, when you're thinking about it from a resilience perspective, is that ability to design and manage systems to avoid or reduce damage from disruptions. So if you dig a little deeper into response as a concept, you very quickly learn that you can think about management strategies as targeted versus general strategies. I just want to walk through this. I know it's a lot, but we'll take it slow because it's important. And the reason it's important is what we found is that the norm in traditional agriculture risk management is targeted response strategies. They have some benefits, they have some cost. Targeted response strategies, some examples would be irrigation or drainage or a specific chemical control for pest management. And so these are response strategies that are very focused, that's why they're called targeted, on a specific threat to the agroecosystem. As I said, it's the norm in traditional agriculture risk management. Unfortunately, if all you use is targeted response strategies, you can increase the fragility of the agroecosystem to unexpected disturbances and shocks. And also the targeted response strategies, and I think we're already seeing this. There's so many examples of this all over the US. But targeted response strategies become more expensive, more difficult to manage, and can ultimately fail as a specific threat intensifies. So that's the caution around using targeted response strategies. You can think about it as the cost of using targeted response strategies only. In contrast, general response strategies take an ecosystem approach to risk management. So it's actually designing the ecosystem so that you can, those so-called ecosystem services provide some protection or create resilience to multiple threats. And examples of these kinds of strategies might be IPM, soil health, and also using biodiversity in the landscape, so planned biodiversity. And these kinds of strategies are working to enhance the ecological response capacity of the farming system. They have many benefits, including they can reduce the risk of multiple threats. So you don't have to be able to predict the threat in order to implement these strategies. And an example, and they also reduce the risk of multiple threats. So for example, soil health is now it's widely recognized as a resilience, as an asset, a resilience asset in agroecosystems. But back when we were first looking at this, it was not so widely recognized as having this, particularly these multiple benefits of reducing the risk of both drought and too much water, not enough and too much water, and also providing benefits to, for example, healthier crops, which can withstand more stress, and then other kinds of benefits to community. So not just on the farm, but in community. And this class of response strategies are often called no regrets adaptation options. And that's because the investments made in these particular strategies provide this broad range of protection or reduce the risk of a broad range of threats. And so if any particular threat doesn't show up last thing I want to say about this, the downside of targeted response strategies is if, for example, you invest in irrigation, but there's no drought in a year, that can often be viewed as a wasted investment. Whereas if you invest in soil health and there's no drought, there's so many other benefits of something like a soil health investment that there's just no downside. That's the idea of no regrets adaptation options. All right, we're all done with the theory. I did think it was important to at least point you to that USDA report and talk a little bit about some of the new ideas that you can find in that adaptation chapter. I got finished with that report and I was really curious to do what I thought of as ground truthing these concepts, many of the concepts that I've shared with you today. And so I decided that one way to do that would be to talk with farmers that were managing their farms as agroecosystems. And so I embarked on a small case study that has grown into something I never imagined it would have grown into. But I began contacting sustainable farmers, award-winning sustainable farmers around the country, farmers and ranchers around the country, and asking would they be willing to talk with me. And the questions I had for them were questions like, what kinds of weather changes are you seeing? How are you trying to adapt to those changing weather patterns? And which ones are working well for you? And then the last question was, turned out to be the most interesting question, was well, how do you view the assets on your farm, or which assets on your farm do you think offer the most resilience benefits? So we're really getting into these questions. We're getting into how farmers are experiencing changing weather patterns, and then how they're thinking about managing them, and what do they see as the assets on their farm that are most useful when they are managing specifically climate risk. So why did I pick sustainable producers? Because sustainable producers, because of the diversity of their agroecosystems, are often not eligible for subsidized insurance, for example, and other subsidy programs that we offer conventional farmers. And so I thought that these, in particular, this group of producers, you could think of them as farming without a safety net. And so they had to design and manage resilient systems. They were also relatively long-term farmers, and they've been, most of the farmers in that first case study, I started doing this case study research in 2012. Most of them had been farming 25, 30, sometimes 40 years. And that was important to me because there was at the time, the climate scientists were telling us that climate change really ramped up in 2000. The speed of change took a big jump up. And so I was interested, remember I was doing this in 2012, I was interested to see if I could talk with farmers whose experience bracketed 2000. So to see whether they had noticed that increase or in the rapid change in weather. And then the final reason the third important reason for me was that this group of farmers in general had this incredible experience or wisdom, we could say, of designing and managing to produce ecosystem services. So I hope you can see from that brief explanation why it is I framed this case study research around sustainable agriculture. I wrote about what I was learning in applying resilience science to agriculture, and also shared many of the stories that I was collecting at the time in my book, Resilient Agriculture, Cultivating Food Systems for a Changing Climate. The book is now in its second edition, and my first round of interviews, I included 25 farmers and ranchers all around the country, in many different locations in the country, and all of them growing food for either regional or national markets. In the second round of interviews, which I conducted in 2020 and 2021, I went back and checked back in with the first group of farmers, those 25, and I added another 20 to this case study work. And so the new set of farmer stories you can find in the second edition of Resilient Agriculture. So I want to share just a few of the trends that I've found in this research, and then I'll finish up with just a few specific stories of individual farmers as a way to give you some examples of the specific practices used that are aligned with these key resilience strategies that I found. So I think you're looking at key resilience strategies, and Dwayne, I'll stop asking, but if it starts to feel like it's not making sense what I'm saying, please just break in, okay?
Okay.
So here are the key resilience strategies that I found in that first group of interviews that I conducted in 2011, 2012. And these same strategies showed up also in the second round of interviews in 2020 and 21. And the first is soil health. So these are the strategies the farmers told me that they felt were most useful as to reduce climate risk or help them manage climate risk in their operations. And the first is managing soil health. And these days, we all understand the resilience benefits of healthy soils. Planned biodiversity, and I use planned biodiversity specifically because it's not just any kind of diversity, it's very specific and careful placing of different species, either over space or over time, in order to increase response capacity or to cultivate response capacity. And an example of this would be the well-known traditional practice of diversifying crops to spread risk out over any particular season. The third key strategy is that these farmers and ranchers in general, sold into different market channels. So they had diversity in their market channels, and they also went for the highest value market within each market channel that they were selling into. Improved water management was a strong theme in all of the case study, this case study research, both managing too much and not enough water. And the farmers shared a lot of new and very innovative approaches to managing this greater variability in water and more intense and frequent extremes in water as well. The farmers in this study were also pretty innovative in how they were using physical protection, but this is a very strong theme throughout the stories that I collected. And then finally, the farmers and ranchers were very aware of the need to set aside some resources in case an event happened that overwhelmed the resilience of their farming system. And so lots in these stories of farmers referring to making sure they had enough extra feed if there was some sort of disruption, or more water, or setting aside a little bit of extra inputs that they might need. So these resilience strategies, at the time, some of them were relatively new or had not been discussed in the literature at all when I was first starting this research. But since then, many other research projects have affirmed that these kinds of strategies are indeed being used by farmers more and more across the country. One area of resilience that I think we are not focusing on enough, or hasn't been focused on enough, it's more lately, we're thinking about a little bit more, and that's the human capacity side of the agro-ecosystem. And there's some new and very useful and good research now to show that discusses what it means to be resilient. It's drawing on psychological resilience science. And I think it's very helpful for us, those of us that work with farmers, to really include this in our thinking about how you cultivate a resilient farm. And here are just 10 qualities of resilient farmers that I've drawn from this new guide, or relatively new guide. It came out in 2020. It was put together by Maryland Extension and University of Delaware Extension. And I think these speak to the kinds of values and attitudes and knowledge that are required for resilience. The farmers must produce profitable crops. They must be able to identify resources and use them effectively, try different ways of doing things. A really important one is reframing problems and threats into lessons and opportunities. Good communication skills. And all of these characteristics, these human characteristics, I saw all through all the stories in both sets of case studies that I've done in the last decade. Some other important characteristics: care for land and community. You able to ask for help and offer help to others. Have the ability to cope with loss and change. Feel connected to others and to a higher power. And this higher power can be spiritual, but they're not referring here to a specific established religion. It's just some kind of a higher power. Could be connection to nature, connection to family. And then finally, to have a hopeful, positive outlook. So it turns out, at least in my work, and also it's emerging in the work of many other folks, that this is the human side of resilient agriculture is such an important piece that sometimes gets forgotten in the rush to new technologies, or trying to increase profitability or increase yield. So I want to encourage you in your own work to think about this side of resilience as well. Okay, so I want to finish up with just a few, although I do want to invite, I know we got a little slow start here, but does anybody want to ask any questions about the resilience concepts or the research project specifically? Looks like we've got a raised hand. Please just unmute and ask. David?
Sure, thanks, Laura. I'm really resonating with so much of what you've done, and it's good to see the source of a lot of ideas that I think have indeed, as you say, permeated more deeply into people's consciousness since you've done this work. My question about resilience, and I'll just put a link in the chat, is because I haven't heard you explicitly mention this, so I'm going to put a little data factoid into the chat, which is basically about the incredible dependence that farm households have on off-farm income in order to sort of make what they're doing viable, even if they're able to make a profit, which many particularly smaller farms don't do, but a lot of farms don't even make profits who are considered farmers. So how you think about sort of their non-farm activities in the context of farm household resilience?
Yeah. You're asking me how does that get addressed in
you're talking
social...
about system. You're talking about systems, and part of the system is the farm household. So
Yes, that's right.
So that's what I'm kind of asking about, how you incorporate that sense of resilience into the framework that you're talking about.
Yes, well, that, if you remember, I don't know if we can go back quickly. Are y'all back at the 4 frames, the different concepts?
Yes.
Great. So if you notice in there, I kind of glossed over it, but resilience is rooted in community. Notice that family is one of those, one of those focal scales for thinking about resilience on the farm. I'm not sure what you're asking. I will say this, how I would think about it is that if that farm family feels that off-farm work is contributing to human and social capacity, then, and it's a plus to the farm family, then it's certainly adding to without any doubt, it's adding to the resilience of the farm. When you've just said it, and I agree with you, most farms in this country do not make a profit. And in a very real way, farm families have been subsidizing our food system for a long time. And that is one way we have cultivated a resilient agriculture in this country, but it breaks those that rule of mutual benefit. I mean, so there's some the way that our farming system is set up now violates some of these key behaviors. I hope I'm not trying to not answer your question, but it is really a great question and not easy to answer quickly. So what I would say is that where that particular aspect of American agriculture falls in a resilience context would be the role of that family to farm and community. And whether or not that off-farm employment is creating mutual benefit. So both the worker, off-farm worker, and to the farm and to community. Is it improving regional self-reliance? Is it increasing community-based wealth? So that's one way you could get into that conversation a little bit.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that your framework incorporated already. I just kind of wanted to highlight the household viability part of the agro ecosystem network a little bit. And I think you responded about how to do that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for the question. That's a rich question, as you can tell. I was having trouble answering it quickly. And I also think that's an area that deserves more attention as we think about solutions, agricultural, or solutions to food and farming issues. And we all very often, I would say, at least in my own experience of working in agriculture, in US agriculture, in a more technical research kind of a position, it's the part we haven't really spent much time thinking about. And I think that resilience, social ecological resilience, invites us to really look at that more carefully, that side of farming, that human side of farming. Okay, so real quickly, I just want to give you just a quick tour through a few of these, what these case studies that I've published and that you can find online and take a look at in more depth. Just give you a few examples of the farmers and the kinds of particularly practices that they told me have they view as their best resilience assets in their operations. Something else I wanted to say about this too. I think we'll leave it at that. I thought it would be helpful for y'all to see how these concepts that I've mentioned actually what they look like on real farms. That was the other thing I wanted to say. In my work in agricultural adaptation, I have learned that it is so important to keep the whole farm or operation context in mind as you have this discussion about resilience or about agricultural adaptation or climate risk management, whichever kind of, however you're talking about these ideas around agricultural adaptation, it is very context specific. And I think that it is most valuable for all of us in agriculture when we are thinking about adaptation practices or adaptation strategies, to recognize that the same strategy might be useful on any farm, but what it actually looks like in terms of practices will be different on every farm. And so that is one reason I made the decision to share these case studies, to share the stories, and to get the farmer's voice into this conversation about what it means to manage climate risk and what climate change means to their operations. Okay, enough of that. So here's a few of the stories. Russ and Kathy Zinner farm out in Idaho.
Laura, if you change your slides, we haven't seen it.
Oh man, what is going on with this? How about now?
It's still on the 10 qualities. There it goes.
Okay,
It's showing less winter wheat now.
awesome. All right. So we'll zip through these pretty quickly, but just remember, I'll give you a place to go that you can actually read at your leisure all of these stories at no cost and at your leisure. So the Zinners farm out in Idaho. Interest of time, I'll give you a second as I change slides to kind of look at their system a little bit. So I'm not going to read the whole slide. They farm 2,800 acres of dry land, grains and beans of different kinds. Everything they produce is food grade, and they are longtime innovators of direct seed or no-till cropping systems out in the Palouse. And they sell everything through cooperative wholesale. It's a farmer-owned cooperative called Shepherd's Grain and Graincraft. And so in the interest of time, I'm going to focus on the specific changes that are adaptations that each of these farmers have made. So they have shifted as winter weather has gotten warmer and spring weather more variable. They've shifted to less winter wheat, and they've shifted from focusing on spring production to fall production. They're using a practice that I've heard from a lot of the farmers that I've worked with. Grain farmers all over the country are beginning to do this. It's called dynamic crop rotation. It was new to me when I first heard about it, but you can now find a lot of good information online. But basically, dynamic crop rotation is the practice of planning your crop rotation, and in every phase of the crop rotation, having more than one species available or more than one cultivar available. And then you're just switching out, you're choosing in a phase that cultivar that fits best with the previous weather conditions, recent weather conditions, and the projected weather conditions over the next few months, the life of that crop. So it's to me, a very interesting and innovative way to approach crop rotation. And to my knowledge, it has been innovated by grain farmers in the US. Already mentioned the high value markets, but they're doing that as well. And then the most recent change on the farm is that Russ and Kathy have started doing custom grazing of cover crops that they've added to this very diverse grain and bean rotation. And the last time I spoke with Russ, which was in 21, I think, or 22, they had just done the custom grazing for a couple of years, and he was very interested in how quickly he thought integrating the cattle into his crop rotation, how quickly that was improving soil quality. So early days on that, but that's just a little look into the Zinner operation in Idaho. So I want to move on to Almar Orchards in Michigan. Has the slide followed me?
Yes, it has. Laura, I was going to say, though, in the interest of time, maybe you could just do one or two more, and then we'll leave a couple of minutes for questions.
Okay, that's fine. So Jim Cohn has been he was the first organic apple producer in Michigan. He's been at it a long, long time. You can see there some of he's got a very diversified operation for an orchard operation. He says that silvopasture, value-added products, and then adding drainage have been the most important tools for him to reduce climate risk on his operation. And it's pretty interesting story here, but I will just leave it at that. His silvopasture, last thing I'll say, is that he actually pastures pigs in his apple orchard. And it was because of food safety changes and food safety issues of having those pigs in his orchard that pushed him into moving into on-farm processing of hard cider. So really interesting story there as well, about all the changes, the adaptations that Jim has made over the times, almost 50 years now that he's been growing organic apples. Okay, I think the last one, I will move on, and the last one will be, I want to share is Fair Share Farm. It's in Missouri. 10 acres of diversified vegetables. It's a very pretty diversified farm as well. They do some on-farm processing. And in particular, the adaptation that I want to point out here, a lot of those adaptations I've seen all around the country with vegetable growers, but in particular, I want to mention this Master Line Earthworks. And so this was a adaptation that they began in 2020, and it's just a berm and swale, changing the orientation of their crop fields to better fit the contours and also create berms and swales just to help move water quickly off their farm. And I just want to show you two pictures here. So this was before picture, and you can see in the lower picture the troubles that they were having as rainfalls have gotten more intense. They were having trouble getting in crops in on time and timing of field work and that sort of thing because water sat around so long in their farm in this original orientation. And after the Master Line Earthworks, you can see pretty major change in how their fields are laid out. And also these pictures are just early, after the first year of the master lining. You can see the two pictures at the bottom show you how quickly the water moved out of this. It's about 12 hours between a very heavy rainfall, and the swales in the fields have really helped move water away. So I think there's a lot of potential for this sort of land forming as we get into these intense periods of heavy rains. Other benefits of this included they're adding agroforestry now to their vegetable farm because they're on the berms. They are planting trees, and they're also in some of the fields planting cover crops and moving livestock through those fields as well. Okay. Lots of other great stories. I'm sorry to have to go through them. Sorry about the technical issues today. You can find all the stories that I mentioned, plus many more at Real World Resilience, cultivatingresilience.com, Real World Resilience. Many of the stories are there for free download. You can get all the stories from the first edition as a free download. And along with the stories from the book, I've also collected links about these farms from other sources as well. So you've got a nice body of information there about each farm. Last thing, and then I know we're almost done, but is just I wanted to share these 3 resources that I think would be a great fast start if you want to start using some resilience thinking in your own work. The SARE Bulletin, Cultivating Climate Resilience on Farms and Ranches. USDA put out a adaptation resources for agriculture that draws on the earlier, this was in 2017, but it draws a lot on the 2012, 2013 adaptation chapter in the USDA bulletin that I start out with. And then I wanted to share again my book and would be happy to give anyone that's on this webinar a copy of it if you contact me. But you can also easily get it on Amazon or go to the publisher and get a copy of that book. So all 3 of these resources together, I think, make a great fast start into thinking about resilience and agricultural adaptation. So we have a minute or so.
Yeah, we'll take one quick question if somebody has a question they want to ask. So is that I see a link in there, but I'm not sure if that is that the if you wanted to put your contact information in there if people had questions, is that available?
Yeah, actually, I think on the announcement that you sent out, there's a link to my website. So that would be
Okay.
how you could find it, the easiest way to find me.
Okay.
Yep.
Well, and just to let everyone know, this was recorded, and we will have that up once it is ready for people to view. I will send out an email to all the people that register, and we'll probably get it sent out to more people than that, but especially to the people that registered. And Laura, I want to thank you again for a great presentation, and obviously lots of really, really good information there. So I appreciate you taking the time to be on today.
Hey, Dwayne, do we have scope to maybe take one more question? I see a hand that's raised there.
Sure, why not? Go ahead.
Great.
Hi, Dwayne. This is just David again. I have some questions. I don't want to take people's time, but Laura, how do we follow up with you if we want to? What's the best way to get in touch with you?
I think just through my websites, cultivatingresilience.com.
Okay.
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 Yeah, and I'm happy to stay on if you've got time. Maybe we invite everyone to go. I don't know, Dwayne, can we keep this Zoom
Yeah,
going?
yep, we
And
can.
maybe just ask folks to stay if they'd like, or if they need to go.
Sure.
Thanks for coming out today.
Yep. So if people have other questions, feel free to open up your mics.
I do, but I'll wait and see if there are others.
Well, that's fine. David, let me just go ahead, get started.
So one of the things that I've observed in my interaction with producers, which is not the main thing I do, so I'm not really in the ag space nearly as much as a lot of other people in extension, is notice, and I've heard a lot about the skill sets that people need to be a successful farmer these days, especially to do, the kind of system oriented kind of farming that we're talking about here, that they're different. So my question related to that, since we're mostly extension people, is what do you see as the value added that cooperative extension in particular could be bringing to the farm community around this kind of work that we're already doing well and or that we could be better at?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the value add, I think everyone in agriculture is challenged, including me, is challenged to really bring a systems perspective to farms, to farm management, to farm design and management and assessment. And so I would encourage any technical assistance person to do some study of this. And the things you want to study are, I think, that the important ideas or concepts to really get comfortable with. We actually already have in agriculture. It's things like whole farm planning, which we have at this point, is it 30 years of experience? Lots of guides out there. And so whole farm planning, which will help you take this whole systems perspective. And then adaptive management, again, long history of adaptive management and natural resource management. And so what I've done in my own work is to draw on those two pots of knowledge along with this resilient science knowledge, and just done my best with the help of many people over the last 10 years or so to pull those concepts into something that makes sense to agricultural systems. So I think there's a need for education, technical assistance education. And then I think there's a need for another area I've been working in, and I think there's a real need for that. Well, that I've been focusing on is how to streamline these ideas, how to help create tools that allow farmers to think in systems without thinking they're thinking in systems. You know, because we're all, I mean, this, and again, this isn't a problem that farmers have. I mean, nobody, if there's anything that the current disruption we're experiencing in this country shows, is that there's not a whole lot of systems thinking going on anywhere. There's not a whole lot of connecting the dots between this action and this outcome anywhere in our culture. And so so I'm not picking on farmers or technical assistance folks. I think we are not in a culture that values that kind of thinking. So, but that's what needs to happen. We all need to get more literate in thinking about things this way. Would be a first step. It's a lot bigger issue than that, but that's the first step. And then an example of a way that I am seeing it work in a very practical way is the work I'm doing around climate resilience planning. And so now you're not, this planning is just part of farm planning, but you're adding a resilience aspect to it, and you're integrating some resilience ideas into the farm planning. And there's an example of that. It's well, I'm working on something right now with SARE that will likely come out this year, fingers crossed. That is an actual, it's a 5-step guide, and you just walk through with farmers this planning. A second example of that is of this kind of work that I think is very practical, and it's a natural way for people to learn, is the I'm not gonna remember the name of it now. It's Rachel Chapman. She's at University of Maine, and it's a national project where they're pairing. Actually, it's on. Well, they're pairing a technical assistance advisor with a farmer, and for 2 years they're learning together adaptation planning. So that seems to be working really well. And I think what makes it work so well is it is addressing a current need of the farmer. They're having a climate risk that is really beginning to disrupt their operation, and they need to figure out how to manage it. And so that makes sense, doesn't it? I mean, that's how we learn best, when we're solving a problem that's right there. Did I answer your question at all?
Oh, yeah, very well. I mean, there's
Okay.
a lot of really thoughtful ideas there. I'll wait. I have more questions, but I'll let other people again go on if they want to.
Okay, questions or comments? I always appreciate being in the company of extension folks.
All right, hearing that, I'll ask one more.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll hold on the other ones. So you kind of started out or at least what I was hearing was kind of an emphasis, particularly in climate change, on a risk management framework.
Mm-hmm.
Which both because I got trained as an economist to begin with, and because the first person who was my mentor was a water resource economist who thought about risk management in the context of irrigation practices. So my question to you about that is in actually interaction with farmers, do you think that kind of way of thinking and talking about how do you manage uncertainty and risk, do you think that is productive, or is there a better kind of way to get into a conversation about climate risks, different language?
I am talking about climate risk and risk management purely because, or as a result of working with farmers, because from my perspective, that's how farmers are thinking about it. And so I was not, I'm trained as, I'm a soil scientist. I'm an agronomist. I've trained to understand how to put together farming systems so that they persist over time or they're sustainable over time. So I was coming much more from the design perspective when I got into this work. I'm not a natural risk management person. That's not my background. But that clearly to me, the minute I started working with farmers, I've led workshops all over the country. The minute I start, and then all of the incredible, generous time that the farmers that are in the case study have given me, it's clear to me that that's how they're looking at it. Farmers and ranchers looking at it as risk. And in retrospect, that makes so much sense to me. That's how they would be looking at it. So yeah. All right. Well, look, whoop, we've got Dwayne coming back on. I think we've done it. Folks wanted to lurk while we had our conversation,
Yes,
David.
yeah. Well, again, thank you, Laura, and appreciate everything you've presented to us today.
Mm-hmm. And just want to send out my thoughts to everyone and good luck as we all navigate these waters. And definitely be in touch. David, please be in touch. Be happy to have more conversations with you. Okay.
Thank
All right.
you.
All right.
With that,
Thank
everyone
you.
have a good day.
Take care.